run your website. Right? There are many different variations in this: HTTP1, HTTP 1.1, HTTP2, and HTTP 3. But there are different ways about it. But in a generally, what is going to happen out, right? So that we need to know. So, for instance, let's say when a system that is there, that let's assume this is your laptop, and you open a website called www.google.com, right? And what happens? What do you think is the process that is going to happen? Right? So usually what happens is that the browser here needs IP address for us to communicate, and the domain name, whatever you're putting in your browser, it's in a word format, right? It is not a numerical IP address format. I need that information. So what is going to happen that is that before, let's say this is my google.com server and its IP address is 8.8.8.8. But this browser does not know what is the IP address of google.com. It only knows the domain. So what is going to happen is that in the first interaction, this is going to send an information to DNS server requesting, I need to know what is the google.com IP address. And this DNS server will have a database where for every domain name, what is the IP address that will be kept out. So in response, this DNS server is going to tell the IP address for this particular website is 8.8.8.8. And now I'll send a request telling that I want to connect google.com. In google.com, what is going to happen is that there will be one file called index.com, the index.html. When I don't have any particular resource to be connected, this is going to send, let's say I have one more resource here, 1.html. That is going to be there. If I want to connect to 1.html, I have to give google.com/1.html. If I don't give any resource here, it is going to give the basic index.html, whatever is there in index.html, that is going to be pushed to me. So in this case, since I've not given anything, what is going to happen is that this index.html file, whatever is there, that is going to be sent to the server. And in the browser, what is going to happen? It will execute index.html, right? And it will display that page based on what the code is going to be. It will display the content. Right? This is typically how any website is going to work for us. Right? So we'll look into that if you want. Right? So let's say from a practical perspective, we will see this. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to use a tool called Wireshark to look at the packet, how the process is happening, how the information is getting exchanged between the client and the server. We can also later, next stage, we'll look at something called as a burp suit as well. Okay. So we're doing a testing out here. What I'm going to do is there's a very particular website I'm going to use. It is called testfire.net, and that is the website that is used for doing for vulnerability practice. So it's a vulnerable website by design. So it can use for training hackers on web application. So we'll look into that. We'll see testfire.net. This is the application. Okay. Before going further, let's capture all the packets going from our network. So we can see the flow that is going to happen. Okay, we'll see that. So let me capture this. Wireshark is a network capturing tool. It will capture all the network packets going out of your system and the ones that is coming into your system, right? It is not designed to do anything else, only capture the raw packets of them. Okay, so we can read the content and everything, all those things can be done out here. So let me give it okay here. And once it starts, so let me reset this. I think why I don't know why it's once. Start this. So you could see here what happened was this is where the actual communication starts, right? So you don't have to know what is how to use this particular tool right now. I'm using this particular tool to know how to demonstrate how the packets do move from one location to another location. All right. So if you remember in our example, we told the initial communication goes to a DNS server, right? If you did I enter a DNS information when I did testfire.net? Did I put any kind of a DNS related information or send a separate query from did I send a separate query for DNS server? No. What happens is that your browser, that is there, your Firefox or Chrome browser, it is been pre-configured to do that for you, right? Whenever you connect to a network, whenever you get an IP address from the router is also giving a DNS server IP address as well. So by default, whenever I want to convert a domain name to an IP address, this is where I need to connect. So in my system, I would have given it 192.168.178.2. I think that will be there. So that is why you will see here the packet is going from where this particular, right? You can see the source IP address 192.168.178.147. Whose IP address it is? It is my Kali Linux IP address. See here. So I can do check ifconfig. When you do ifconfig, it will show your current system's IP address. So it can see 192.168.178.147. That is my IP address, and it is going to the default DNS server out there, right? So here you could see that when I click on that particular message, I'll get the detailed message out here. So when I click on domain name system, and you could see here there is a query is being sent. It is asking get me the IP address, query here testfire.net, type A, and class is in. So it is requesting for an IPv4 IP address for this particular domain. Okay. In the response, you can see there is now, when the response is coming back, there is an answer set up for that, right? So DNS server here will give me back the IP address. In this case, the query is there in the response and along with the answer is also there. What is the answer? It is telling the address for this is going to be 65.61.137.117. Okay, this is the IP address, and you can see here the next communication the browser sends to the particular server. Before any communication related to HTTP occurs, before this there should be a TCP handshake. What is TCP? Three-way handshake. And you see that is what has happened out here, right? That is what is happened out here. You can see sync, SYNAC, and ACK packet. Yeah, the two times it's going to be on the safer side that is running out there, right? These are the two packets that are there. And once that is done, there is the initial request that goes to the system out there. Get HTTP, there's a local domain out there, and it will send out the request out here telling that I want to connect to this and this is what my information is about, right? And after that, next is going to be the information how to display this particular packet. So this is nothing but your HTML code for this page. The request is been sent and the request has been received out there. right? It is very, very simple out there. This is how predominantly it will work, right? Any request it goes, it will take and create in server, will create an HTML file, and it will send you back for that part, right? So here we have to understand there are two components out here, right? There are two components out here. One is the hosting server. One is the hosting server. Hosting server is nothing but your, let's say in our case, it could be an Ubuntu operating system, and where it could be hardware or it could be EC2 instance or anything that is, but it is a hosting server where there is a full-fledged operating system available out there. Inside this hosting server, there is one more particular package called as an Apache. Right? This is where whenever you request from your browser, it is not the operating system that is taking that request and processing it. And this is the Apache software. It could be many different things. It could be Nginx out there. It could be Tomcat, right? Internet Information Server. A lot of things are there. Right? Any of them is going to be. All of this are called as a web application server. Main reason is they only know how to process your HTTP request. This is what is going to happen, right? It could be anything that is there, and this is the process it is going to deal with that part. Whenever I'm requesting a particular resource, it is how it is going to process. It is going to take that in case we'll have index.html, and this is the file that is going to be pushed into the network, right? In a simple way, if you want to see this in an exactly real world scenario, let's look into that. So let me say I will install in my Kali Linux itself. Right? What can I do? I can install Apache Linux. Right? Let me do one thing. Let me install it in a different machine. Right? So we can see how client and browser is server is going to interact. Let me see. Yes. Simple way to install server is apt install Apache 2. I have installed already, so it should tell it is already there. Right? It is already there. I'm going to check whether it's running or not. It is in a, you can see there is in green, it is showing as active, it is enabled, so it means it is running in a proper. So how do I check whether it is running in the browser? You can just give localhost, right? And see this page is a default page, right? So this is the by default. If you're connecting something here, in this example, I'm not going to use the domain name, I'm going to use the IP address, right? Because for domain name, you need to have a separate dedicated a public IP address. We are not going to be dealing with that part. And I don't want to use etc host file itself because it may not serve the purpose for this class as well, right? So look at how exactly it is happening. So how does my browser know that this is the page it has to retrieve out, right? So for that, we need to go to the where the location of the default Word document is going to, right? You could see in this folder where www.html, there is a file called index.html. And if you see, this is the file that is getting pushed every time whenever someone is trying to access that file of that, right? Particular domain on that. Let me do one more thing. So I can also do something like echo. I'm just creating a simple HTML page, right? One dot. So let me access two different files from here. So let me get the IP address first. 143. So all I have to do here is http://192. Will be inserted 142. Sorry. See, I can access that particular page. If I don't give any information, it will always open the index page. Or if I want a particular resource, I can give, in this case, 1.html, and it will show me that particular page. Right? So that is how it will go. But here, there is a very difficult problem or important problem that we face in an HTTP protocol. Right? So by default, what happens is HTTP protocol is called stateless. So what it means to say is that, let's say if I send one information, it is going to not remember, it is going to treat two separate requests in a separate way. Right? It is for them, it is not a continuation of the process. Everything that is required for the response to be complete has to be sent in the first request itself. And whenever you're doing the second request, it is a completely independent. So HTTP protocol does not remember history. Right? Even if it is 1 second before. Right? Only when you connect at that time it has to be there, and everything is going to be processed, going to be distributed. And that is not the case with, if you see SSH, that is not going to be the case. SSH is going to maintain that connection, understand when the request is coming from me from the second time, and that is not going to be out there. Right? So here what happens is that because of this, in SSH it remembers, right? And in HTTP it does not remember. Meaning, let's say in case if you have a login process, what is going to happen? You are going to enter your username and you are going to enter your password, right? And request, let's say you want to request review some information. Okay, this is fine. And once you send, the server will cross check the username and password is matching. It will send the information that you requested. Okay. Now let's say after a second or 10 seconds, after a minute, you want a new information, or you want to see the same information again with the latest updated information. Now if I send here only the request, it will send back a request telling that what is your username and password. Right? You will tell, I've already entered the username and password. Why should I enter here? The reason being is that HTTP is stateless. Stateless meaning is it does not hold any history about the communication. It will not know that you have reached out, you already connected, you already entered the password. None of this information is going to be processed out. Whatever the information for doing this activity is required has to be sent in your every request that is going to be there. So in this case, for every time you're requesting some information, you're supposed to be sending your username and password. In a single sense, telling it, let's say you're having your Gmail open in your browser, right? In your browser you have opened, and this is connected to the server, Gmail server. There it is going to be shown on that. Every time you're refreshing your web page on your Gmail web page, you actually have to send a username and password. Why? Gmail is based on HTTP protocol, right? That is going to be there. It does not know. And every time you refresh, it does not mean that part, right? Every time you're refreshing, you're supposed to send your username and password, right? So that is the actual scenario. But are you, right? Are you sending any information? Are you sending any information? Are you entering your username and password every time you're pressing the refresh button? No, right? No, that is not happening. So how is this process able to manage this out there? What can be done by us process? What has been happening out there in the background to overcome this scenario? Okay. So any idea what could be there here? What has been happening out there? Any idea, guys? Anyone can tell me? How do we overcome the authentication mechanism issues faced by stateless behavior of HTTP protocol? Hmm? Any idea? So let's see. Yeah.
Oh no, I was going to say, what was the question again? I didn't quite get it.
So how do we overcome the HTTP protocol stateless behavior for authentication mechanism? Right? We are not sending the username and password every time we are sending any request. Right? We're clicking any button. We are not sending any username and password. How it is done? Because without sending username and password, every message has to be authenticated by the HTTP server. So how do we overcome that situation?
Using certificates.
User certificates. User certificates. What do you mean from user certificates?
I mean, because it's a three-way handshake. So initially when communication is being set up, there's communication, there's a request sent from your side to the server, and then it sends back a packet, and then once that connection is established, there are certificates on both sides that can be authenticated.
Certificate will, when you're talking from that perspective, that is HTTPS certificate, and only the server sends the certificate for security reasons. Client, it is not mandatory, but 90% of the time client does not exchange certificate. That is only requested when you want to prove your identity to the server also. That if they're telling only certain user can connect in those situations, especially this happens when there is an API call between two servers. So I'll tell only server one should connect to me, no other server should connect to me for request of them, right? But what you're telling is exactly right. You may not be using the right words, but you're exactly right. So what is going to happen is that when a user connects to the HTTP server, right, the Apache server out there, he is going to send her the username and password. So something is returned back to the server, which is going to help them do this process out there. Okay, so let's dive deeper into this process. And this is a very important criteria, especially when you are dealing with, uh, organizations, when you are doing a threat model, right? Let's say you are a security engineer in the organization, and the development team will ask, we are going to communicate, we are setting up a domain, and this is the authentication mechanism, what should be doing out there, right? What are the things that we need to consider out there? At that time, session management is also one of the key components of them. For you to be able to understand the vulnerabilities, we have to understand how that session is going to be authenticated by the server out there, right? So when I'm using a server out here, and it is basically meaning it is a web server, okay, or you can tell it is running as an Apache, okay, in a simple way. Now, sorry, when you register as a new user, what is going to happen? The server is going to have a database, right? Server is going to have a database, and here I will store the username and password, right? There will be a table where I will be storing this information out there for that. So when the next user connects to me, I will come back and check. So whenever I want to log in, from my system browser. I'm going to enter, for instance, I can tell my username is Karthik and password is, I'll keep it as password only, right? As I'm a bad user, I don't use strong password policy. I'm using very basic password. But what happens is that when I send this along with my login page, whenever you're putting any login page, and this information is going to be sent. Okay. Now what is going to happen here is the server is going to take this Karthik and password and is going to check in the database, right? If there is a valid username and password, right, then it tells the user is existing, and now is where the process is going to change. what it is going to happen is that it is going to create something called as a session cookie, right? Cookie, whenever a server wants to store some information on the client, the browser, it will use this mechanism called cookie, and that will be stored as long as the browser is there. Okay, as long as you don't delete the history and what is the lifetime set for this cookie, it is going to be stored in the browser itself. So what it's going to do is that it is going to assign some random number, like let's say in this case, for example, I'm going to tell the session cookie is going to be 1234, and two things is going to assign. Creates a cookie. After create, it is going to assign whatever the permissions it is there for Karthik here. Karthik, permission to cookie here, 1234. That's going to be there. And it is going to send this cookie back to the browser, 1234. Okay. Now, the thing is that this is nothing but a replacement for the username and password. Instead of me sending every time username and password, what now browser is going to do is that every time I'm sending a request, it is going to add this cookie information and it is going to send with the request out. Okay. And whenever this keeps on how much of a request you're going to send, that is going to go with this part. And whenever it receives this cookie 1234, it will cross check what are the existing cookies. If it is present, it will take, and again it will give the permission. It will check whether that request is having for that particular process belongs to that or not. This is how a simple way of doing it is going to do, right? So I'm going to look at that, and in those process, first I will enter the username and password. When the communication is successful, then it is going to reply me back to a process of that. Okay? So that is what we'll see. So let's look for this. This is how it is going to manage. Okay. So when I click on log out finally, when the communication exists finished and I want to log out, I'll click log out. What it's going to do is that it is supposed to destroy this cookie out there, telling that this cookie, if I send one more request via this same old cookie, this will be rejected as unauthenticated cookie out there. It will not allow you to communicate with that. So that is how this is supposed to deal with that component. Okay, so let's see how this behavior is there from a practical perspective. I'm going to use a very particular tool here called burp. So this is a tool that comes pre-installed with Linux, Kali Linux. If you want in Ubuntu, you have to install it. Any other thing, you can install it in Windows as well. That's not going to be an issue, right? So what this is going to do is that it is going to act as a proxy. So meaning, whenever you send in information from your browser to the server, this is going to sit in the middle. The burp suite is going to sit in the middle, and it will capture the packet, right? It captures the packet and hold it, and then I can make modification, and after the modified request can be sent to the server out. Okay. Sometimes if you want to just view the request and then see the response, that can also be done. Okay, that is what we are going to do here now. For instance, here you will see exactly how whenever a request is sent from the browser, right? For you, you will always think, okay, I'm just clicking on something, some button on the web page, but what exactly is happening in the background, we will look at that information as well. Okay. Please stop me if you're having any doubts or anything. It's totally fine. We can actually go further into that and we'll see how it's working. Okay. So let me start a tool called burpsuit. Click OK. And here in the browser, I also have to set up certain things for that. So I have to tell that all the packets I have to send it via the burpsuit only. Okay. So instead of doing so, I'll do something. It will be a bit more easier for me. So In our main course, we'll go quite deep into all the different tools that are going to be used for pen testing and all those things. So this is one of the tools that we use. So when I do this, any request I'm sending can be captured in the proxy proxy. Okay, in the burp suite, it's going to be. So for instance, let's say I will open the page testfire.net here. Let me click on here. There's a sign in option. I'm going to click on it. So now let's do one thing. Let me intercept the packet and see what is happening out. So here I'm clicking on sign in and let me see what's going to happen. So here you could see, this is the request being sent out, right? It is telling connect to login JSP, get this particular web page, and from the website testfire.net. And you could see there is also a session ID assigned to that, but I'll come to that later, right? So when I do, this is the actually the request that has been sent. Let me, 1 second. Increase the font size here for you guys. That's a bit easy for you. Whatever the request, whenever you're connecting from your browser in any system, any application, any website, this is how it will really look like. A lot of information is sent. It is telling which resource I'm looking at in this place. I'm looking at a page called login.bsp. Which website, testfire.net, is the website out there. But it is sending other additional information. It is telling I'm connecting from a Mozilla browser that is there in a Linux operating system. If you're opening from Windows, this will be something related to Windows operating system out there. And other encoding languages supported by the current browser that is going to be there. And the other things are there. Okay, that is how it is going to be there. So when you send this, right, let me send. I'll send it something called as the repeater to look at both request and response. Okay, when I send this information, and this is the response. This is an HTML page that is supposed to be received by me. Okay, what exactly is? For instance, it is the source code for this page that is been sent back in the browser form. Okay, and that is what it is showing out. So now let's do one thing, right? As I told, this is an HTTP protocol for any communication. If there is an authentication set, that is going to be assigned for that part. So in this case, by default, this particular website is having a default username called jsmith, and the password is been set is called as a demo1234. Right? For us to be able to log in, we'll enter the username and password. jsmith demo1234. Let's intercept this packet in the middle and see how this request actually looks like when I intercept it, right? When the server is receiving, how does it exactly look? So we click on this and you can see this is exactly how the information is sent. Along with that, the username and password is also set up there, right? And this is happening. You can see this is where the username and password is being set and the request is sent to the server out there. Okay. Once that is happened out there, the system allows checks for that in the server and it is logged in to the system out there. Okay. So now there are multiple functions that are happening out there. We'll see is that let's click on this view account details where it will show the transactions for this particular user, right? This is a fake website, fake banking website. It is giving some information about that particular user's banking information, right? So this is that. So now let's look at what is actually this request will look like. Let me refresh this page. Okay. See here it is telling give me the account information for the account number 180002 that is being specified. But there is no username and password. If you saw the previous response, we had sent the username and password. So what is happening? What is happening here is that you could see here this particular JSession ID cookie information. The server The server, what it did was after you entered a particular username and password, it told this is the session ID that belongs to you. Every time you're connecting next with me to this session, please use this session ID. That is what is required. Instead of sending my username and password every time, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to send the session ID out there. So meaning I don't have to store my username and password on the browser end. That is very, very important out there. Now, so every time this communication is happening, any communication I'm sending, right, from my system, this is always going to contain the session ID out there. Okay. And you could see if you want to, if you don't have a verb suite tool, you could also see, you can give inspect element, right click on your page, click on inspect element queue. And if you see in storage, it will show all the cookies. Along with that, you can see the session ID also here. So let me copy this and paste it in a page that you can view. Right. Remember, that is the session ID that has been given out here. EB, right? And this is what how it is going to work. Okay. So for everywhere we go, there are different ways of authenticating and different timeline assigned to this particular component. Even if you're using Gmail, an authentication session token will be used after you enter the username and password. Every time you are refreshing the page or anything, any website it may be, as long as you're logged in, right? As long as you're logged in, this session ID will play an important role on this one, right? Once you log out, there are certain places, certain websites, let's say, if you go to apple.com, let me do one thing. Let me disable pub. For normal browsing behavior, let's say I'm opening here, I'm opening the different Mac system out here, I'm browsing here, right? I'm opening iPad, iMac, iPhone, or anything. I will not need a session ID out here because this is just for browsing information. Nothing else is required out here. Only when there is a login functionality like sign in and sign off login process, that is where we require to have this session ID behavior. That is one of the reasons why HTTP protocol is made into stateless, because the number of people using static pages, number of people you browsing website without having to log in is going to be very high, right? You don't want to track the session information. So that is why they will tell you use a separate option like session management for to be able to, identify and track and process your session login information for this process. Okay. So any questions here, guys? So what I have done, explain here. Any questions here? This is going to be there in any website of your choice, right? Whichever the website you're going to do, this process is going to be mentioned out there for sure. Any questions? Okay. So now the main question now it's going to be is how can we, as an hacker, right? As an hacker, how can I work? So just give me a second. So as a hacker, how can I bypass this particular process? Right? What should I do? What should I do to overcome this? Right. So my main portion is that if I can get access to your communication, right? I can get access to your session ID. I should be able to hack into your account information. So how do I get overcome this situation for you? what are the different ways that we can do? What are the different ways I can capture this session ID and bypass the authentication for your case, right? How do I do that part? So one of the ways we can do is that if you see, sharing my screen. So let's say, because I no longer, when you're having a session ID, for example purpose only, I'm giving a very simple session ID like 1234. The previously what we saw very long session ID, that is the actual length it is supposed to be. It should not be something like this. Okay, so that is very, very important. Now, if I can capture a session ID, I don't need the password to bypass. Right? I don't need password to send in the request of that. Without logging into someone's information, I can do this access of it. That is the main advantage for us. Right? So how do we overcome this kind of a situation? So for instance, I'll show you an example here. Why session ID can be. Let me capture the session ID here. Right? So this is the session ID. Copy and paste it here. It's already there. Now let me open the incognito mode in my browser. What is incognito mode? It is just that, right? What is happening in incognito mode? Nothing happens out there. It is make sure just that it is having a separate session entirely, right? It is having a separate session entirely, and it is requesting this information. It is not that no one can know what you are seeing. It is not storing that browsing information in your browser. Anyone who's capturing your traffic will be able to know what websites you are visiting, what transaction has been happening, everything is smooth. It does not provide any kind of a privacy out there. Only make sure is that the data when you open this and close this, this is not going to remember, right? So that is what is going to happen. So for example, let's say I want to access this account information for 8002 savings. I capture this and I will enter in my incognito mode. When I enter out there, if you see, it is getting me back to online banking page, login page. Why? This particular resource I have not signed into this, right? Once if I have signed into this should be able to be processed on them. So let's do one thing. We'll try to capture this information on the website and see can we do it, anything can be done with it. And you could see here, there is a session ID already been assigned, but this is a new session ID and this session ID is not yet been validated. Telling that since this user is not logged in here, username and enter, this session ID is not been told that this is what is happening. Here cannot log. So this is an unauthorized session ID. So what I can do is that if you remember, the first page I've got a session ID and this session ID is authorized because after entering the username and password, in our case jsmith and demo1234 was entered, and after this session ID was authenticated, right? So if I'm sending a request based on this, I should be able to send that information, capture that information. So let me copy this, go back to my request. Instead of this session ID, I'm going to paste the authenticated session ID, right? So this is what a hacker would usually do when you're bypassing it. Because it does not know your username and password, I can capture your session ID and send in the request, right? When I send in the request, what is going to happen? It should see here in this page, I had not entered username and password. It was giving me, showing me login page, right? Since I was able to get the session ID of the other user who's already logged in, I can log in as that particular user, right? That particular user, I can log in. So now your question should be, how do I get other user session ID? This should be a question for us. How are you going to get other user session ID? And how do you think you can get other user session ID? Remember one thing, this session ID is going to change every time you log in and log out. Its ideal behavior, right? Ideal behavior is that this session ID, if I'm using 1234, this should be valid only between login and logout. And if you do login and logout once again, this session ID should change. It will not remain the same. Technically speaking, a session ID is one-time use only. If one particular number is used once, it should never be used again. That is the logical behavior of it. So how can I get access to a particular user session ID? What do you think? What can I do? Right. So what are the different ways I can compromise the user's authentication? What do you mean by authentication? Authentication is very simple. There are two types, right? One is authorization, but we are looking at authentication. Here we are only basically talking about username and password. Now, taking others' identity. How do I take others' identity? That is the point of it. So one way is to take other username, other users' username and password. So for instance, usually what we do is that, you might have done, a lot of people will do, if you want to get to know some others, your friends, Instagram ID or their password or anything, what you will do, you might know their username, right? You might know their username and you will guess their password and keep on entering multiple times, right? You might have seen in Insta and Google that if you enter 3 to 4 times wrong, it will block that user, right? It will ask you to do captcha and probably block your particular IP address also for some time. So it is behavior thinking for that. But what are but that cannot be done on other applications. That is, it is quite intensive and other applications will not have that kind of technical capacity. But what is that is needed out here? And how can I? So this I can do, but I can do session ID, right? I can do session ID also to bypass someone's username. Yeah. So if I say each and every, let's say the request is 1, 2, 3, 4, right? If I keep on sending 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 1, 3, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, I should be able to hack that session ID. Right? One of that was. So any idea, any one of you, how we can compromise the session ID?
Cross-site scripting can be used basically.
Cross-site scripting.
Mm.
Okay, that's very good. Apart from cross-site scripting, what else can be done? That's a very good one, right? Cross-site scripting can be used. Okay. Apart from, you can do something is clear text. So for instance, whenever the communication is having over HTTP, it is going to happen in clear text, meaning there is no encryption account. Anyone in the middle is able to read that information. Okay, that is going to be there. So that is why we are supposed to switch to HTTPS, because at that time the communication will not disclose what information is going through. Okay, I'll just show an example for this. Okay, second point is that something called as a session fixation also is there. I can fix a someone session of the predefined out there. That can also be done. Fourth one is brute force. Right, brute force, like if the session ID is not long, I can, if it is small, I can do a brute force. So I can try all the different variations, what I can set up out there, and it will work out there. Right, that also can be done. Brute force can also be done. Again, random lack of random session ID. What do you mean from this? What is happening out here? So let's look into this, right? So what happens in a randomization is that, let's say one particular, there are 3 users that are connected: user 1, user 2, and user 3. The user one connects, right? User one connects. He will be given a session ID called, let's say 1234. Okay. Whereas the user 2 connects, okay, he will be given a session ID 1235. Okay. And the user 3 connects, he will be given a session ID 1236. See here, there is a continuous approach that is happening out there. Now user 3 wants to connect to know, bypass user 1 session ID. All he has to do is that he will send a new request with one ID 1235, and he will see he's gone user 1, user 2 ID. Okay, let me do one more thing. Let me do decrement one more time and see. And he'll send 1234 and he'll get access to that part. Now that could happen. Also, I can do increase or decrease, but it will be a lot more easier, right? How much ever the long session ID, if it is in a continuous way, it is going to affect you out there, right? So that is why you will see, right? If you see here, I'll show you. Let me log out of this session. Let me close this. Let me come back to the actual page. When I log out, sign out, and I sign in out here. Just now, I don't think so it will change here because it is a vulnerable web page supposed to behave in that way. Okay, fine. So it is showing EB19131. The information is there. That is exactly like that. So this is not supposed to happen. Every time I log in and log out, it should modify that also. Okay. So let's say, let me forward this. Let me interception out. Let me sign out. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete the history, right? Completely career history, including site setting, everything. So all the cookie information will be cleared now. And when I do testfire.net again, let me capture one more time. And you will see the session ID is completely different, right? It is not in a continuous format, right? There is no difference out here. There is no commonality out here, right? This is mandatory requirement out there. They also tell is that more than 70% of that particular session ID should not be same. It should be different from the previous session ID. And every time I'm doing this, let's say I have to do one more time, right? Let me do one more time. I will completely close this. I will delete the history. Let's see if I do testfire.net once again. Let me capture. You will see here. The third cookie that is also there, it just keeps on changing. And this is what is supposed to happen. Right? That is one thing. Right? This is one scenario. There is one more scenario. What we spoke about is clear text. Right? This is this particular point on there. So I'll show you the difference. We will see from a Wireshark perspective, right? We'll see from a Wireshark perspective what happens when you're communicating over an HTTP protocol and what happens when you communicate over a HTTPS protocol. Okay, here it is showing in HTTP protocol. So everything is going in clear text. So for instance, let's say I do JSON remove 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So if I'm capturing here, so all the information that is being sent, everyone will be able to capture that information, right? So for instance, could see hello John, that information, everything is there. So let's look at a different older HTTP protocol here. See here, you could see the HTML protocol request is being sent. The username and password is also been given out there. And the JS session ID is also been captured out there. So if the communication is not encrypted, everyone who is capturing in the network, who's there in the network, will be able to look at this information, right? Now let's do the same process, using the HTTP protocol, okay? So what here you could see here, it is not possible to view, you know. See here, you could see the padlock symbol out here. It says the strike out here. It means it is running on HTTP, right? We need to have a clear padlock symbol out there to show that it is running in HTTPS, right? So very simple. In this application, what is happening is that we are having an HTTPS also available. For me to be able to access it, I have to give HTTPS:// and press enter. Okay. Let me disable the pop for a second. Okay. Let me do one. Let me sign in. Okay. And you will see there is a padlock symbol is enabled out here, and everything is going to be encrypted, right? So if you click on this, you can see more information. You will be able to see the certificate. When this certificate is there, it means it is a encryption is enabled on this. Okay. Let me do sign in. I can do the same thing. Just now. Demo 1, 2, 3, 4. And your session ID is also going to be there. So if I try to capture the packet now, let me recapture the packet. Let me stop. And here you will see there is no longer any HTTP protocol information out here. All of them are TLS based, and you cannot see what information is available out there. It will be in encrypted data format. It is telling I cannot view the data because everything is going to be encrypted. So all the communication between the client and server is going to be encrypted. No one will be able to look at this information, right? If it's happening over clear text, anyone can view your session ID and they can capture it and they can get hold of the information available out there, right? And do the session hijacking from your end. Okay. One more thing is brute force. We are also out there, and we also spoke about random session ID, right? Lack of randomization that is going to be there. So we'll come to session fixation later. Let's talk about XSS attack perspective. What is an XSS attack? So what do you think it's the difference between a client side code and a server side code? What do you think is the difference between here?
I think the client side will be a little bit more, it will have a little more restrictions on it.
Mm-hmm. So basically here you're talking about where the code is executed. Okay. For instance, when you're having an HTML page, the HTML code is there, right? So if you remember, I wrote a very simple HTML, H1. This is second file. And I close this tag. So this is telling that what font. So it will print a bigger font and this text to display this page. Where do you think this code is getting executed? Is it getting executed on the server or it is getting executed on the client?
On the client side?
Exactly, right? This is getting executed on the client side. And the server side code is different. For instance, to give an example, what is going to happen, what do you mean by client side code is that, let's say, let's look at a code for PHP info page. Okay. So it's very basic. Is going to be the this the one thing. Just give me a second. So if you remember, PHP will be a server-side scripting language, right? So meaning it means the PHP code is always going to be executed on the server side. Right? So I'm going to save it as control. There I do need to save. I will need to save it on. Do like this. Alt F8, other locations, GitHub, where downloaded, new. One dot PHP, right? Let's say. So if I give local host here, simply server is not running. See, this is the default page that is going to come up. So this is happening here, even though both my browser and server is running on the same system. Browser is acting as a client and the Apache is running as the server out here. So that is the scenario. So what is happening here is, for instance, it is opening the page index.html, and whatever the information that is being disclosed out here, this particular complete page, the code is a client-side code, and everything is getting executed on the browser only. So everything that is there, it's going to be there in that part. So that's how it will work. At the same time, let's look at one more page. That's one.php. Okay, we're going to press enter here. I think some issue is there with the page. Just give me a second. This was working for me. It's not working for some reason. So now, just see here. So what is happening? I'm opening the same page, localhost 1.php. This page is having only, technically it can having only one line. I can even divide it to 3 lines to make it a bit more legible for us to do. It is only happening is having 3 lines. There is no information like this, what is supposed to be happen out there. But even though it is having only 3 lines, it is printing me such a large information page filled with so much information, so much text, so much formatting and all. So why do you think this is happening out here? And how exactly is this happening? Right. So here it is since PHP is a server-side programming language, what is happening is whenever from the browser, in our case, what I've done, I'm given localhost / 1.php, right? If you remember, it will go to your Apache server. Right? If it is a normal HTML page, it will take that whatever the HTML page is there, and it is going to send me back out there. But when you see here, there is a PHP with the requested resources PHP page, it is going to do one thing before sending me the HTML part. What Apache is going to do is that it is going to run a command in the background, php 1.php, right? This is a built-in function for PHP. PHP opens this page and it has something called PHP info, right? This is a built-in function. This function gets executed. The output of this function is a HTML file. And the Apache, it is sent that file to the Apache. Apache then sends it to the browser out here, right? Even though there is only one here, the file created is large. Since this command is getting executed on the server side, it is called as the server-side scripting language, right? If you go to that exact location and run it, same, you will get the same output, the HTML part for that. For instance, here, let me go to the where that particular file is, right? If you see here, 1.php is here, right? If I give php 1.php, this will now generate this particular page. The exact code that is required, HTML code for displaying that page is there. You can see this PHP licensing is here, right? Right. If you open this page, go to the last. This is where it is there. Same thing. Right. Exact same thing is put up here. This program is a free software that is being there. Please contact license at PHP. That is what is happening. Exact same thing is about it. So this output is going to be sent back to the browser, and browser reads it and executes it. But the program is getting executed on the part. So this has a two part. One is at the server and the client side. But there is also something called as a JavaScript. JavaScript is out there. There is a need. Why there is a need for client-side programming language, right? Unfortunately, what we talk about HTML or CSS are static, right? They can't do any calculations, right? For instance, if I have to do 2 + 2 and it should show me that do this math calculations, HTML, CSS cannot do that. They can only do graphical display part, how a application should do that part. But as the process goes on further and further, more people are using, there is some kind of a calculation that needs to be done on the browser in order to reduce the load on the servers, right? You might have played a lot of games on Facebook and everything. Do you think all the calculations, graphical calculations, and whatever the calculations is happening on the server? If that is the case, the Facebook will have to deal with a lot of, the money they have to spend on server, and server utilization will be very high. They can't do that. They want that kind of a calculation to happen on your browser itself. So I just give a simple example, right? Let's say we'll do a online calculator. Okay. So this, whenever you open a web page, you'll get a calculator. And when you go, let's say there, can have all those things are there. So if I press 2 + 2, I should get 4. In a traditional application, what is going to happen is that this is going to send 2, value 1, 2, value 3, then the operation is placed. The server is going to receive this, it will do the calculation is equal to 4, and it will send the output in the HTML format. That value is 4. This is what is supposed to happen. So now this is fine, I think not a basic problematic. But let's say if there are a billion people, users for this, and all sending out there, they are actually responding with a billion requests, and each user will have multiple transactions. It's not going to do one single calculation, maybe doing 10 to 15. So 1 billion users are using, and their 15 request calculations are done by an average. We are looking about 15 billion communication transactions out there, right? Calculations happening on the server. So now what they did was they came up with a very clever way. What happened was they came up with a programming language called JavaScript. So what is going to happen is that when I open the page, the server request, it will send the HTML part along with a JS code as well, right? JS code is a Java side and JavaScript code. What it will do is that it will have this calculator information. How to calculate this program code will be along with the JS itself. So when I press 2 + 2 here, instead of sending it to the server, it will calculate on the browser itself and display the answer out there itself. That is how it is going to be done. Someone is having a question. Yes, this will be saved as a recording as right. So here you are getting a JavaScript, the code is getting executed out here in this thing. And because of this, a huge amount of transactions can be saved. You don't have to worry about it. And I can run the so all those calculations, JavaScript, whatever you're talking about, React, Angular, or anything is all based on, right? I don't have to worry about a lot of things. The way when you open, let's say, when you open your banking transactions, you see there is in a particular format, this statement is getting displayed. Who is managing that? How it should be displayed? How many of them it should be opened and everything, right? All those things will be done by client-side programming language. Critical decisions will be taken by server side. When it comes to doing some basic calculations and other things, will be taken by the browser itself, right? So even here now there is a problem out here, right? There is a problem from when you talk about JavaScript. It is very powerful. I can make it if you're that is why if you would see long time back, sometime back, couple of years back, when you open any web pages, you have to enable JavaScript. That if people are JavaScript, so because that was the impact it had. Because if the session can be compromised out here using that. So just for an example purpose, I will show you. We will see one example called from a bbox application. And this application, we are going to see something called as a stored XSS attack. Right? Stored XSS attack out there. 0.46. Let me open my browser. 192.116. So this is one of the applications we use for testing or practicing web application. We go through this application from the class. So let's say there is an XSS attack and we are doing a stored attack. Okay, same thing is happening. Let me reset this. So let's assume, right, you're in someone's Facebook comment or Insta comment or anything. You people tend to comment on it, right? So let's say you can give hello, how are you, right? For anything, whatever, whenever you comment on someone's post, that is going to be visible to all the users out there, right? So here, what is going to happen is that there is an XSS attack, right, where you can give, right? What is going to happen here is that we can give a very specific payload where it will give out the users document info, session ID out there, right? For here, we could see, for instance, let me go here, inspect, storage. There's a session ID here. Let me copy this and paste it out here so that I can cross check it later. Okay. right? So here, you could see here, when I put this particular payload in the web page, right? It will print out, it will in a pop-up window, it will print out the session ID for the user, whoever is logged in, right? So here we could see that it is quite easy. It is very simple, right? Very simple code is that this particular session ID. This is what is happening is that it is running on the client side, the XSS attack on the browser. Whoever that user is running this code is going to happen, right? But here we saw this particular attack is going to be difficult. Main reason is that the user has to put the payload in the browser, and this becomes a bit difficult out there to get this information, right? And this script, from an example perspective, it is just showing a single line only. In reality, JavaScript is very powerful. Instead of me putting just a single line, I can put multi-page code into the same text file and can make it do anything. I can also write a JavaScript code that will take the session ID and send it to remote hacker system, right? As soon as that code gets executed, it will not even give a pop-up, right? Pop-up also will not come. The reason it is giving pop-up out there is that I'm using an alert. This is a JavaScript function where it will give me a pop-up for that, basically. So to prove that this code, kind of a code, can be executed, we are doing that part. So this is going to be done out there, right? Think in a similar way. Let's say there is a celebrity post, right? Someone hacks into this celebrity post, let's say do Insta, right? So let's assume Insta does not have an XSS protection. It will not work if you try this attack on it. Let's assume this is going to be there. And this celebrity is having 15 million users. Okay, 15 million users are there. If someone hacked into this celebrity post and put this, right, script, alert document.cookie, right, and close this. Whenever this post is updated, this page is viewed by millions of users, and this code gets executed on those millions of browsers out there. And what could happen, right? For them, in this case, it will just give a pop-up for that and show their own session ID. But in reality, if the hacker is good enough, he can make them all the millions of users session ID to be stored in a particular. So you can decide whose account you can compromise. All those things can be done out there. Right? That is how we have to be careful with this part, right? So this is what exactly is happening in this situation, right? So this is a stored block. Whenever someone is commenting, everyone opening this page, they can view this information out there. If I take the same code, this particular code, and paste it as a comment, right? Paste it as a comment. Every time someone's open this page, that comment is going to be executed. That command payload is going to be executed. It is not only for one user. Anyone opening this page is going to be infected with that part. So here, every time I'm refreshing, this is getting infected out there. That is how dangerous this can be. And that is one way of able to compromise this process. Right. Session ID is very, very important. So how do we overcome this kind of a session ID? Is that making sure that session information is enabled only via HTTP only flag, and something called as a secure flag is there for each of the attributes. So that has to be enabled. For instance, remember, right, we are talking about inspect element. If you go to storage, I can view the cookie information out here. Let me use the magnifier again. If you see here it is showing as it is not a secure practice. HTTP is false, secure is also false. In both the cases, this is not there. If it is kept on HTTP and for secure is equal to true, for both of them is true, it would not be possible for us to compromise this kind of a behavior. Your session will be safer out there. It's still possible to break, but it becomes more difficult to do this kind of a behavior out there. Okay. So any questions still here till now? Any questions still here? We'll go with session fixation finally from the session management perspective. So
I just want to add one note.
Yes.
Guys, it is a interactive session. Feel free to ask because it is a, it's a very rare moment you can find on internet that where you can talk with this people like Mr. Karthik who have like a enormous experience as a researcher as and same time in industry on the cybersecurity field. So whatever question you have, feel free to ask. And we don't judge based on your question because no question is a bad question.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Karthik, please continue.
No, please. Thank you. So now, one more thing that could happen here is that we'll talk something about a session fixation. Okay. So usually this for session fixation to occur, what is happening here is that the attacker is forcing you what is your session ID is going to be fixed by the attacker, not by the server. Okay. Usually behavior, what is there? When you send the information, your username and password to the server, right? The session ID is created by whom? Session ID is created by the server and sent back to you out here. This is the actual behavior that we see, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. But in session fixation, right? This is the hacker is going to give you session ID. How is this going to happen out there? There are multiple things that has to happen out here. Okay, they have to use the get information. Okay, get information and post information. So here, what do you mean by get and post information? So let me talk. For instance, we'll see two different scenarios out here. Let's look from a HTML injection perspective. So in get information, whenever we are sending any data, right? Whenever you are sending any data, what is going to happen is that the information is going to be sent as part of the URL itself, right? Let me capture this. Right? Click on go. This is going to be there. You can see the URL only it is having. The information is going to be in the URL itself. So that is how the behavior it's going to be, right? And even in this case, the session ID should also be sending in the URL itself for that attack to be confirmed. There is one more attack, right? There is one more attack here. What is a post request, right? Post is entirely the opposite. Here, what is going to happen is that whenever you send any information, it is not going to be sent via the URL, but the HTML body is going to request is going to have this information. So here, previously the information was sent from the required out there, and here it was get request was there. Here now it has been sent in the body. Okay, so this is a safer approach to do this. Never send information via get request, right? Why? The get request, since the information is sent in the URL, whatever the information you are going to send will show up in your history, browsing history. Yeah. Okay, you could see here the get request, the first name and last name that we have specified out there, it is getting stored out there. If your username or session ID is there, it will also get stored out there. So someone can steal that session ID from there also. I think someone is talking. Sandhya, please can you put yourself on mute. So now Same thing is going to happen for the post request is going to be there. For session fixation to be successful, the application should have the get request enabled out. Okay. In this case, what the attacker is going to do is, first, this is the server. Okay. The attacker from his machine, he will send a request to the browser that he wants to connect. Right? He has not entered the username and password. Is not entered by him yet. Okay. Whenever you connect, you saw in the testfire.net web page, a default session ID is going to be assigned, and this is going to be given out. Right? The session ID is going to be given out here, and this is going to be sent like this in www. It's going to be domain.com, and maybe session ID is equal to 1234. Okay, this is going to be sent out like this. Now the attacker, what he is going to do is that he will send this link, whatever he got from the server, link to the victim hotkey. Okay. Now attacker knows the session ID is 1234. Okay. The attacker knows the session ID is 1234, and probably if they'll check out the link, there's a new offer or anything, there's some kind of a social engineering is going to happen. So victim will look at the link http domain.com and ID is equal to 1234. And there is no problem in this because he is connecting to the legitimate website. He knows that website is not a fake website. And he knows this is the default behavior of it. So now what he's going to do is that he is going to send the ID 1234, which is already there in the link. The browser will take care of it, and he will send the username and password. So in this case, let's say Karthik is the victim here, and he send out that, right? Now what is going to happen? The response. It is going to check the username and password in the database. It is working fine. Now I'll authenticate the session ID. I've authenticated and telling you can use the rest of the communication as 1234. Now the hacker has been waiting for 5-10 minutes. Right? He's waiting for the victim to log in. He's waiting for Karthik to log in. Now Karthik is logged in, and this is the session ID that is going to be there. Now, hacker does not have to worry about what is the Karthik session ID. Capture React does not have to do. He does not have to do XSS injection. He does not have to, do brute forcing or anything, because he already knows what is the Karthik session ID is going to be. Now he can send a new request to the server telling that, let's say user profile, view profile, right? And I'll give 1234. What it will do? It will show Karthik's profile. Why? This particular session ID belongs to Karthik user, and it will show the current user's profile for that one. Okay, so that is how it is going to be there. So now my question is here, how do you think, what could be your general behavior to overcome this situation? What could be done? What can be done? Right? I know you guys will not be aware of it, but what could be the behavior for them? What could be the solution to overcome this kind of a situation?
Can I ask this a small question
Yes.
before I answer?
Yes.
I fully understand it. When the session token is created, is there a decryption encryption mechanism that the hacker uses to actually I don't know, like tap into the data that is being sent and being received?
No, there's no encryption or decryption. So this will work on normal HTTP packet, right? So in some situations, as I told, whenever you connect to the server, before logging in, a session ID has been given to you. Okay. And I also told this is only going to work when you are having the session ID sent in the browser URL. For instance, let's say, let me close all the pages. Let me clear the history. Everything. So when I do testfire.net, right? So this should not be the case. So here I'm sending a request to the testfire.net and I will forward it. In the response, right? In the response, a session ID has been assigned to me. I have not yet, if you see this page, I have not yet signed it. The application is not logged in. If you go to inspect and go to storage, you can see there's a session ID being assigned to me. But there is no authentication attached to this part. So if I try to access something, it will tell you are not authorized because you have not entered the username password yet. Okay. So now after me entering the username and password in a correct way, right? So this is going to be same session ID is going to be there, but it is going to be authenticated for me from the future part of it. Right. In this case, this is not going to work. Attack is not going to work because in the URL, it is not having the session ID is not sent in the URL. It is sending in the body part. Right. For instance, what I mean to say is, what is it? This it happens very rarely nowadays, but we have to check that. Not able to find it. It's somewhere here. It's very long one. Starting this, right? So this will be something like this for this attack to be successful. Let's assume this is the URL. It is going to be there. Session ID is being sent in the URL itself, right? All I have to do is copy this URL and send it to someone, and they will be able to log in. And once they're logged in, so this will be authenticated for them, right? So what could be? How do I overcome this kind of a situation for this part? How do I check for this vulnerability there or not? Right. So this is a very important test we do for every application we test. And it is very simple. It is not that complicated. I don't have to really do a lot of activities out there for this. So the simple logic is very simple here, right? So for instance, this is the diagram for that, right? A session ID has been received, then is able to communicate that user in a particular way, right? So now what I'm going to do is the server should be designed in such a way that, let's say, an hacker gets into this, he gets a response back, the session ID is 1234, and I'm sending it to the victim, right? And victim will send that link to the http domain.com, then question mark ID is equal to 1234, comma, then username is Karthik, and password is going to be password, right? That is what is going to be. So now as soon as it comes here, it sees the session ID is being given out there, and it will authenticate that particular username and password, and it is correct. Now, instead of responding with the same session ID, what it is going to do is that it is going to create a new session ID and it is going to send back telling that for the any subsequent session, please use this particular session ID, right? Now, what happens? Whatever the session ID sent by the hacker is no longer valid, and this particular user can continue to browse in a secure environment. And this attacker will not know what is the new session ID that is there. So how do we test this in the server? It's very simple. For instance, both the application we will use both from here perspective as well as from the testfire.net perspective. Okay. So let me log off here. This is vulnerable to session hijacking, this particular website. I'll show you how. Okay. For us to be able to look at session keys every time going to inspect element and looking at that, it can be very difficult. You can use a very easy browser plugin. So whenever any website, you logged in, it will give you all the cookie information out here. In this case, the cookie editor here it is telling what the cookie is for that particular website. So for let's say for Alter Mutual before logging in, what is the cookie information? You can see this is the information is 92 and this is the information, right? If the session ID is same before logging in and post login, then this particular website, whatever you're having, it is having a session fixation vulnerability. In this case, it is having the same cookie that is there before and after login, then it is a vulnerability is there. But if you see the other page, let's say for the BWAP login page, if you go to the cookie editor here, right? If you copy the session ID before logging in, there is a particular session ID that has been assigned, and after logging in, there is also one more session ID that is there, right? So is this a session ID same as before? Here, the session ID is changed out here, right? So in one application, it is showing the same, not changed. But in other application, it's changed. Okay. So this will be taken as vulnerability because since it is not modifying the cookie after, even there is being maybe sending the cookie information via post and other things is still not acceptable. You still have to change the cookie information has to change out there, right? After logging in. Here, this is working fine. This is not a vulnerability. It is the actual behavior for the application. In some application, what is going to happen is that when the desktop connects to the server sends back the login page, right? There is no session ID given at all. And that is also legitimate behavior. Only after you log in, sending the username, it will give a session ID. Before that, there will be no session ID. In both the cases, the session ID is supposed to be different after login. Before login, whatever you do, that should not exist. That is one of the things that we can look into. So that is how different ways we can compromise sessions in the application. And this is an actual how you test for session related vulnerabilities in real-time applications. Okay. So any questions? So this is where we stop for the session fixation. session related vulnerabilities. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah. So, could you please go back to your board again? This is something that I need to understand.
Yep.
Then if the cookie keeps revolving, then how do you did explain that it keeps you in the
I didn't get you.
So Lassie, please mute your mic. Yeah. If the cookie keeps on the second side, like when you look at line 4
Yes.
and 5, it
Yes.
keeps evolving. Then how is the I'm trying to understand how
No, so I got it. So what you're telling is that every request the cookie is changing? No, that is not happening out here.
but
Yes. So once you log in, the cookie is going to change. But after it, every request I'm sending post after my login, the cookie is going to remain same till I log out again. Okay. Till I log out again, wherever I go, let's say I'll go to set security level, any other page I go, move out of there. It is not going to, the cookie information is not going to change. Okay, it is going to remain the same. This is for session fixation. So once you logged in, the cookies are supposed to change, but now the cookie will not change till the current session is terminated. Okay, terminated can be for many reasons, right? Sometimes you log out is the termination. One is timeout is also out there. That is also one of the possibilities. In either cases, what they're going to do is that when you log out, they should deprecate that cookie, telling that you cannot no longer use that cookie. When it times out also, it will automatically logs you out and deprecate that cookie out there. So once this happens, when you click on log out again and you log in again here, right? Now here the cookie will change again as soon as you log in. Even though it is just 1 or 2 seconds are done, this is how the session is going to be here. Right? See here it's changed again. Yeah. So for every request for the when it comes to CSRF token, that is going to change for every request actually. But that is a different scenario. That is a difference. Session ID is required for that. Is it clear?
yeah, okay. Yeah, it's clear, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So anyone else is having any questions, guys? Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, man, I think we are done. So we can continue with DevOps, close this and we can start with DevOps, please.
I think we are good to start for our
Yes.
DevOps classes. Guys, if you have any question before Mr. Karthik, leave the meeting on. So if you have any question on cybersecurity, feel free to ask, or if you have any question.